Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit.
Welcome to Magister Dixit, a podcast that invites you on a journey into realms of expertise, imagination, and occultism. Delve deep into the minds of those that have dedicated their lives to mastering their crafts, and how having an esoteric or supernatural influence has shaped that path. In each episode, we will engage with magisters, true masters of their respected fields, as they share their unparalleled insights, unconventional knowledge, and their unique perspectives. Venture into the mystical as we converse with filmmakers, musicians, and renowned authors. Listen to their perspectives on their respected disciplines and how being a practitioner of occultism has influenced their craft. Remember, in the realm of knowledge, Magister Dixit, the master has spoken. In today's episode, we have the honor of exploring the left-hand path philosophy with our esteemed guest, Thomas LeRoy. Thomas LeRoy is the founder of the Sect of the Horned God. It blends philosophy, psychology, mythology, and the occult into a symphony of enlightenment and self-discovery. Thomas brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our discussion today, having background steeped in profound insights. The Sect of the Horned God, which he founded, challenges conventional beliefs, encourages critical thinking, and empowers individuals to embark on their own paths towards sinister illumination. Join us as we explore the symbolism of the left-hand path and gain profound insights from Thomas LeRoy on personal growth, spiritual exploration, and the pursuit of the true enlightenment. Without further ado, let's welcome Thomas to the show. Okay, so Thomas, welcome to Magister Dixit. It's great to have you on. And to start off the show, I always like to ask our guests what early experiences or influences led you to become interested in occultism and the philosophy of the left-hand path.
Well, like most people raised in America, I was Christian. But my story was a little different than most because I was exposed to basically three different kinds of Christianity, if you will. Beginning with my mother, who was Catholic. And I remember the old cathedrals in San Francisco, this one specifically with these creepy stained glass windows and statues and the priests with their incense, burner things. And it was creepy to me when I was very little. And then I lived with my grandmother for a while, and she was a Jehovah's Witness. That was interesting. And then after
definitely
that,
a departure from the Catholic faith.
Yeah. Like I said, all I remember is just from the Catholicism, I remember creepiness. And the people in the church appear to be sad, if you will. They came across as being unhappy. And then, like I said, I ended up a Jehovah's Witness for a while with my grandmother. And that was a hell of a trip. And then after that, I ended up in a foster home, and they were Lutherans. And with them, I even became an altar boy and all that other shit. But I was always rebellious. I always had a rebellious streak. And also, when you're exposed to three different kinds of the truth, and every single one of them was the truth, and there were three vastly different, well, Catholicism and Lutheranism aren't that different, but there's enough differences in it. And with the Jehovah's Witness in between, it didn't take long before I became very skeptical. But like a lot of people, when one leaves, let's say, religion, you still got this itch. You still got this, let's say, this void to fill, if you will. You can call it a spiritual void or the God-shaped hole or whatever the hell you want to call it. And a lot of people fill it with, I don't know, some people fill it with politics. others with drugs, if you will. And I went searching for something, I guess you could say spiritual in a sense. So I attempted, what was the first? I looked into like Wicca, too soft, basic paganism, way too soft. And I read some Crowley, but he was confusing, for like a, 13, 14-year-old or whatever it was. And then, being from San Francisco, Anton LaVey was an institution in the Bay Area. Everybody, absolutely everybody knew who he was. All right. He was the unusual guy who lived in the Black House on California Street. And his book, his first book, the Satanic Bible, was in every bookstore. And in a lot of bookstores, it was in the religious section, believe it or not. It wasn't just, let's say, in the occult section. And I remember that cover.
They used to put the Necronomicon right next to it also.
Yeah, the Simon Necronomicon later on, yeah. But I remember that cover with the sigil of Baphomet on it, and it would creep me out as a kid. And like I said, I was very familiar with LaVey. And also, in my foster home, my foster mother used to shop, I think it was at a Sears store. I think it was, you had to go down California Street to get there. So we'd pass his house. And I remember every time we passed the house, her knuckles would turn white and she would grip the steering wheel really tight. And this one time she did that and she looked over at me. She goes, Tommy, an evil man lives in that house. Oh, okay. And then, of course, I learned who that evil man was. And so I was highly intrigued. And then, like I said, I tried out all this different stuff, and none of it was, and what I realized too is I was simply giving up one faith for another faith, if you will. And to me, that seemed a bit hypocritical until I picked up that black book. And it made sense to me. It was like seeing my reflection, if you will. Mm. And it allowed you to be skeptical. You know what I mean? It allowed you to not, it wasn't based on faith. It was based on common sense, a lot of it. So that's initially the beginning of my journey, if you will. And over time, okay, that was what opened the door for me, if you will. And then over time, I wanted to expand on the path itself. I wanted to learn other aspects of the path, other practitioners, other philosophies, so on and so forth. And plus, I'm a big time history buff. So when I study anything, when I get into anything, I love to find out the origins of it. Like I used to play in rock bands, and I had who influenced this guy and who influenced that guy, and it would go all the way back to, let's say, blues originally or whatever. I needed to find the origins of whatever it is I get into. I just have this weird, I'm seeking.
It's very common because I have the same needs as well. I'm a musician, and we play death metal, and it doesn't matter because then it goes to heavy metal, and then we listen to the earlier hard rock like Rainbow and Nazareth and Uriah Heep, and like you said, you take that back and you're listening to like Cream and bands like that, and eventually you do work your way back to the blues. But anybody who becomes really I think interested in a particular field, be it music, art, nobody knows who the fuck Gauguin is or anything like that until you kind of immerse yourself into the world of art and the finer arts and stuff. And it's interesting that also having a perspective coming from San Francisco as somebody just kind of seeing LaVey as I don't know, the evil guy in San Francisco or whatever. I know they had older footage where he was even doing like public access shows or like TV shows, like, and he'd have like Togar on there and stuff, you know, it was like kids
The
show with puppets and stuff.
The Brother Buzz Show.
Okay.
That was a Bay Area show for kids. He was on. This is pre Church of Satan. This is before he shaved his head. The Brother Buzz Show. I remember that when I was a kid. I don't remember that episode. I don't know if I ever saw that episode.
Yeah, it's online. It's online too. But he was a character in San Francisco culture, you know, even before founding the church.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting, you know, you growing up in San Francisco, and having that view of it, you know, all up close and personal, you know.
Yeah, and I knew playing in bands in San Francisco, playing the different clubs, so on and so forth. I met plenty of people who had been to the Black House. I'd never been there. I would have loved to have gone. But yeah, he was a bit of a character, if you will. But no one was really, at least in San Francisco itself, no one was afraid of him. You know, I don't even think really his neighbors were all that afraid of him or intimidated or whatever. When the Satanic Panic came around in the 80s, he by that time he was laying low, if you will. His daughter Xena was doing a lot of the speaking for him.
Yeah, he wasn't doing any more interviews, and you know.
No, and I don't blame him, because that was a lot of stupidity going on at that time. But go ahead.
Oh no, go right ahead, please.
Oh, but anyway, I was okay. My path, like I was saying, going back in time, historically speaking, or whatever. It's in some ways it's seeking a truth. You know what I mean? It's like that game of telephone where you get a bunch of kids, you know, saying a phrase, and by the time, you know, it starts with one person, and by the time you get to the end, it's something completely different. Well, I want to go back to that first person, you know what I mean, and ask them, what the hell did you say? In a sense, when it comes to like esoteric practices, when it comes to the occult, so on and so forth. So I got interested in Druidism, but when you get exposed to Druidism nowadays, it's this bullshit Druidism that's only a couple of 100 years old. It isn't a couple of 1,000 years old. It's even worse than that 200-year-old Druidism. You got this hippie Druidism, and it's complete horseshit. So I wanted nothing to do with that. And like I was saying earlier, you know, the paganism and so on and so forth. But still, the origins of the path, trying to locate that is kind of my obsession now. And that kind of led to eventually starting the organization, the Sect of the Horn God. And like I was saying, we are the Sect of the Horn God and not the Sect of Satan, because I'm trying to go for something a little wider, a little bigger than just Satanism.
So basically, your inspiration was that you found what was already presented to you kind of not enough.
Some ways, it's just my interest. I mean, they just expand. I mean, I have tons of respect for LeRoy and the Church of Satan, but I just needed a little more. I wanted something, I don't know. I wanted to expand from there, if you will.
Well, I have to agree with you also. I think many people who read, you know, LeRoy's books identify, you know, you hear a lot of people go like, you know, I really identified with a lot that was said in it, but, you know, I think, but it wasn't totally me. You know, I think there's what a lot of people come away with, you know, and when you start your occult interest, just like you were saying with the music, it's you go down the rabbit hole and you seek out and devour everything that you can get your hands on, you know, and it's like, you know, from LeRoy, like you said, right to Crowley, and, you know, maybe read some of the other authors and stuff, but, you know, it's a journey to find like that that right niche that feels comfortable for each individual, you know?
Personal, which feels
Yes.
personal for you, because the left-hand path is very much a personal path. So it's kind of, it's appropriate to take from other sources than just following one.
Right. And custom, you know, and because it's something that we want to live, you want to make that experience as true, or you know, or have it as resonate as much as possible with you, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, did your educational background or any career experiences contribute to being involved in the occult or wanting to start the sect?
I, like I'd said, I played in bands, and then I went to Hollywood and I did some bit parts, acting in Hollywood, and so on and so forth. And I contribute that. I mean, living your dreams, if you will, I contribute that to being on the path. You know, the path inspires you to take chances, if you will. So like I was saying, I did the bands, I did some Hollywood stuff, and then I ended up in Northern California. I ended up getting custody of one of my daughters. So I moved to the country instead of having her go down to Hollywood, because that's no place for a teenage girl. And I ended up living on a winery. And on this winery, I became the caretaker. I also opened up a small bookstore, and I put on events, Renaissance fairs, a metal festival we had going. Also, you know, like local, let's say blues bands or you know, local bar bands would play there too. A jazz band every once in a while. We had like these Friday night concerts, so on and so forth. Beautiful setting. I really enjoyed it. Had a whole lot of fun. And then I put on a pagan festival. Now, the people involved, I liked the people. I found them interesting. They were fine individuals. But something about their outlook toward common paganism and the gods and so on and so forth, I wasn't too crazy about. So at the festival, I made sure that there was what was called the left-hand lounge, where people can go into this section of the tasting room of the winery. And if you leaned in that direction, that's where you would go, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not long after that, I did that a couple of years, actually, the Pagan Fest. But it was after that first Pagan Fest that I thought, okay, the horn god, their interpretation of the horn god is lacking some testicles, if you know what I mean. So I was thinking, there's got to be some way to rejuvenate that, let's say that raw paganism. Where is that? Where is it? Let's hand the horn god back his testicles. And it wasn't long after that we started the sect of the horn god.
Interesting. And what are some of the founding principles and the philosophy behind the sect of the horn god?
Well, like I had mentioned earlier, incorporate all different aspects of occultism, paganism, heathenry, whatever. For instance, we have Satanists, we have Luciferians, we have Setians, we have Odinists, we have people, even some people who lean maybe more toward the Eastern practices, so on and so forth, Shavists, if you will. We have all different kinds of people. Basically, you can make any god that leans, let's say, toward the left-hand path, your personal god, if you will. It's once again, it's more about you and what works for you, and incorporating these different ingredients. And I refer to this basic philosophy of eclectic left-hand path, this eclectic left-hand path philosophy as sinisterism. The word sinister comes from the Latin word for left or left hand. So it's because some people, well, I've met plenty of people who have gotten frustrated with Satanism because of the direction it's gone. Like for like right now, we have a very well-known satanic organization that's basically right-hand path Satanism, the Satanic Temple. Their emphasis isn't on the individual, it's on the collective, and trying to make an impact upon the status quo. When you're on the left-hand path, you don't really give a shit about the status quo. You know, you're outside of it. Like I've heard plenty of people saying, you know, us Satanists need to come together and start our own community and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, whoa, slow down. We're not communal. All right. And the organization too. So staying on that theme, the organization is structured more of, let's say, like a university than it would be a church. We're not a collective. We're not a herd. We're a pack, if you will.
Concept of self deification and sinister illumination is part of that path.
Eventually, yeah. That's
And what roles do mythology and psychology and even philosophy play in the teachings of the practice of
it's
sect?
Well, to begin with, let's take psychology, because everything begins with that, if you will, because everything is psychological. Like for instance, you don't know for 100, you're not 100% certain, not 100% certain that you are speaking to this really cool guy who lives in California right now. You could be dreaming it. You could be, you know, a nutcase sitting in a cell somewhere, rocking back and forth, you know, drooling on yourself, imagining you're doing this. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We can't be 100% certain. So in that respect, everything is filtered through the consciousness, if you will. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty damn certain I'm talking to you. You know, I'm rather certain that I'm not dreaming, but I can't be 100% certain. So everything begins with psychology. Okay, it all begins in the consciousness, if you will, because without consciousness, you know, you have no awareness. So that's where it begins. And then mythology, mythology is like a song, you know, and let's say ritual is the dance. And mythology helps connect you to the deeper parts or into the depths of mythology helps you to connect with the deeper reaches of your psyche, if you will. Those symbols, the metaphors, so on and so forth, help you connect with the collective unconscious, with the archetypes. The gods, for instance, are avatars of the archetypes. You know, the archetypes are more than symbols, but let's say less than what we would define as real, whatever real is. Philosophy.
Yes.
Philosophy is also very important. Philosophy philosophy in general led to the science of psychology. I mean, Nietzsche was a huge influence on the early psychologists such as Jung and Freud and so on and so forth.
And so Jung's borderline involvement with basically magic. You know, I mean, it's a thin line between what he's talking about and magic, and he crosses over that line a lot in a lot of his writings, I think, you know.
Yeah, very much so. What I find intriguing about him is there's always been that Platonic idea of a real world, and then this world of matter is the false world, and so on and so forth. With Jung, I see Jung, he would say the real world, in a sense, is the collective unconscious, if you will. Matter, of course, where we are, this exists, but it's more like the membrane of a bubble, if you will. And what's inside of that, that's the collective unconscious. That's a bit, let's say, that's more important, if you will, in Jungian psychology than what takes place in the ego, you know, on the surface.
Yeah, and also incorporating such concepts of like synchronicity,
Right.
and archetype phenomena, you know,
Right.
and like you said, that collective unconsciousness,
Yeah.
you know, like tapping into that stream of consciousness that we're all in tune with.
Or we should be.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing when we on this path, basically. That's what we should be doing. We're going deeper than what's just here lying on the surface. And like I said, so for me, the direction is down. It's not up. It's not up to something higher. It's going down deep into the psyche. That's more important than trying to connect with something that out there that might not be out there. But I know my consciousness exists. I know my mind exists. You know, I can't be too sure about basically anything else. You know, I can believe it maybe 90%, 95%, 99%, but I can't be 100%. But I am 100% certain of my consciousness, if you will.
And that's total Carl Jung thinking, that whole individualization concept of, you know, just realizing the individual self.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and connecting with that self, with the self with a capital S.
Yes,
if you will.
Yeah, and it's a much different approach in way of thinking than somebody like Nietzsche or Freud, you know, and a lot of their writings and how they view the you know, the human endeavor.
Yeah, Nietzsche, he had problems with truth, if you will. You know what I mean? He wasn't quite certain what it was. You know, like for instance, like for me, the argument of theism versus atheism, which tends to be a big argument in Satanism. And I find it to be a waste of time, because it's not about whether Satan, for instance, is real or not. It's about what you get out of being on this path that's important. Some people feel need to anthropomorphize him or it. You know, others don't feel that need. It's what is it making, being on this path, does it make you a better person? You know, maybe not in the eyes of society, but you personally, for you, does it make you a better, stronger, more powerful being? And that's what's important, not the real or unreal. I'm so tired of that.
Right. Now your practices within the sect, do you do invocations, or is there any type of rituals that are performed, or ceremonial magic, or you know, what elements do you guys incorporate into your you know, your practices?
Recently, like me personally, what I do a lot when I'm at home, I do more like yogic exercises, deep breathing, you know, let's say smaller rituals, if you will, personal rituals, so on and so forth. But we have had a couple of, let's say, okay, last October, a group of us went outdoors and we did like a 3-night long ritual, if you will. Very pagan, but very raw, dirty pagan. We incorporated we incorporated Odin as one of the gods. Another was Kurnanos. Another was a little known Dionysian British god called Brachioca, and also the Morrigan from Irish mythology. Like I said, it was long, it was drawn out. It basically lasted for 3 days. It was very cathartic. So yeah, we get into it, if you will. But mostly what people do, they do their own thing. Because we have all these different deities that people revere, we don't have, like, let's say, the Sect book of rituals. It's up to you. How do you want to interact with that entity?
And it's interesting because in the left-hand path, there's a lot of diversification in how each group practices or exercises their, left-hand belief system. Whether, like you said, whether it's some of them that just have a atheistic point of view and look at Satan as the adversary to kind of be that fist in the face of judging everything, and on that kind of aspect, and not a very spiritual type of journey. But then you have organized sects like the Temple of Set and the Order of 9 Angles and things like that, where there's a degree work and levels, and and then you had alluded before, then you have organizations like the Satanic Temple, which, to me, I only really see them as a political organization. I don't really see them doing any theistic type of workings or anything. It's just kind of, again, being that using the name of Satan in the way to be that adversary, that shock value to the people that they're engaging with politically.
Yeah, now I can't say they're not Satanists. They're not Satanists as maybe we understand Satanism, but they claim to be based upon 19th century Parisian Satanism, the Satanism of the absinthe drinker poet types, these young guys. I
just don't see any promotion from them as far as trying to promote those type of teachings or anything. To me, it just seems like it's bumper stickers and slogan shirts and shocking I don't know, the residents of some town in Oklahoma setting up a Baphomet or whatever, to eventually get what everybody wanted to happen, which is for somebody to come and destroy it. So it only fulfills itself. And like I said, I don't really see anything non-political from really that area, from that particular organization. I don't really, delve deep into them or anything, but just like any kind of engagement that I ever see is always political. It's like, well, if the Christians could do something here, then us Satanists are going to do it here too. It's like,
now I've spoken to Lucian Greaves a few times. He's actually a cool guy, and I get his point. I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to get back at let's say, the satanic panic types, and trying to make, the Christian hypocrites, trying to get them to wake up. But see, that's the reason why it exists. You know what I mean? Like you were saying, it's the politics that comes first and foremost. It's exoteric. It's not esoteric, if you will.
Yes.
It's about making an impact on like the status quo, making a difference within society. Let's say, well, I like to say that we on the left-hand path should be the monsters at the windows at night, and we're peeking it, but we're not part of that family, if you will. We're on the outside. They're the type they want to go in and disrupt the home, move around the furniture, knock over shit, and then get out and then laugh about it in a sense.
Right.
Where we should be disconnected from the status quo. Of course, we have to, we all have everyday lives and we have to interact with our neighbors and so on and so forth. I get that. But psychologically, in the heart and mind, we should be disconnected from the status quo to be on this specific path, to really go down this path, to accomplish something on this path.
Now, another approach to other left-hand path belief systems is the concept of becoming one's own god or whatever, and or becoming godlike. Is that something that the sect also embraces, or what's your opinion on that?
We do, and that would be Sinister Illumination, if you will. But what is that exactly? I mean, a lot of people say it, self-deification, apotheosis, whatever you want to call it. A lot of people say it, but what does it mean? And for me, it's okay. When, let's say, an individual is dying, all right, and you go through these stages, right? Initially, when you hear that, you have this terminal illness or whatever, you go through these stages: denial, anger, so on and so forth, and then finally acceptance. And anybody who goes, and we all will one day, a lot of us, it'll just happen, all of a sudden, whatever. But if you go through that slow process, you'll eventually reach that stage of acceptance. And these people will tell you they've never felt more alive.
Right.
And it's that acceptance of death, if you will, that makes you appreciate living life, what it is. Life becomes a tangible thing. It's not just an abstraction that you're wandering through. And what I'm trying to do with my own path, and hopefully helping out others, is to reach that kind of acceptance before you have to go through the whole dying process, if you will. We're all dying in a sense anyway, but you know what I mean? Before you hear, hey, you got 3 months, that acceptance, that to me, that's self-deification. That's becoming one completely with existence, with yourself. You appreciate life, who you are, so on and so forth. And if you can reach that stage before that awful process, before going through that awful process of actually dying, that's what I see as true self-deification.
And how do we do that? What's the process?
Well, are you familiar with the Agori? The Agori sadhus of India? They practice Hindu left-hand path. These are those extreme guys who hang out and in cemeteries. They cover themselves with the ash of the dead. They drink out of human skulls, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what they're trying to achieve. Now, there is the argument that Eastern left-hand path is different than Western left-hand path, and it is. And not everyone who is heterodox, let's say in the Eastern Hindu left-hand path, is on the left-hand path as we understand it. But I think some and many are. And I think a lot of those Agori sadhus, some of them are phonies, some of them, like it's an excuse just to get fucked up because they do drugs, they act wild, or they're just tourist attractions or whatever. But some, I think, are honestly really, really dedicated to the practice. And they're trying to reach that stage, like I was saying, that stage of acceptance. And how you can do that in one way is to connect yourself to death, to the shadow aspect of the self, to your ultimate fears. And, here on this path, we use a lot of the, let's say, the demonic, the dark, the death-like iconography. I mean, it's very, very common. And I think that's a positive. I think really facing death, facing the ugly, the horrific. For instance, the Agoris will sit on a body, on a rotting corpse, and meditate for hours, as they try to conjure up, if you will, images or, the literal Kali Ma. They'll chant, so on and so forth. They'll do hallucinogens, all that. And I think facing death will help you in that acceptance of life, if you will.
And what advice would you give to individuals interested in exploring left-hand path or joining an organization like the Sect?
Okay, most of us got on this path because we were pissed off. We felt lied to. We felt betrayed. And I fully understand. I understand that anger. But I'm seeing a lot of people, like, Facebook groups, so on and so forth, and all they're shouting is "Hail Satan" and how much they hate Christians and they hate their parents because they're Christians. And it's like, okay, I get it at the beginning. When you're on the starting line, I get it. But you got to let that shit go. You really got to let it go. And if you can honestly let it go and still want to pursue the path, then okay, work your way down. But a lot of people, when they let that anger go, they realize, you know what? I'm still a Christian, really. And I was just going through an angry fit. And then they find themselves back, their asses sitting in a pew in a church somewhere. That's common. If you really want to pursue this path, that's the number one thing I would say to people. Okay, I understand the angry phase. I went through it. We all went through it. But get through it and then move on. All right. I've seen people my age, and I'm not a young guy, who are still shouting their Hail Satans and they're angry at Christians and they hate them and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, just stop. Just stop it. Start studying. It's like LeVay said, Satanism is about study. It's not about worship. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's about going way beyond.
And he had studied everything. If you talk to people who knew him, he was, he dabbled in everything. He read up on everything, ceremonial magic, he was into Crowley as well. He had a big painting of Crowley hanging in the living room. When you're into, like I was saying before, when you're into this stuff, you're just like, you're into it. And when you were saying about becoming more knowledgeable about it, what books or writings do you recommend to people who come into your organization, or even people, like we were saying before, just individuals interested in the left-hand path? What books would you recommend?
Number one book I'd recommend to anyone. Well, most people who get on the path have already read the Satanic Bible. You know what I mean? Here in the Western world, especially. But one I'd highly, highly recommend to everyone on the path is Lords of the Left-Hand Path by Stephen Flowers. That gives you a nice overview of the path, from east to west and then different individuals who have practiced it throughout the years, so on and so forth. It's an easy to understand read. It's not like trying to read Crowley or trying to read Julius Evola or whatever. Those guys tend to get very wordy, and you need a thesaurus to understand what they're talking about half the time.
Sometimes the message is in between the layers.
Exactly. Yeah.
On purpose too.
Yes.
To a degree,
Yeah.
Not just gonna put it out there, it's like you gotta kind of weed through it,
Yeah, exactly. Where Stephen Flowers and what he wrote, I mean, it's you get it. And I recommend that book highly to everyone, especially if you're new on the path. It'll give you a nice overview of what the hell's going on.
Dr. Flowers is an upcoming guest here.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. His Germanic rune work and everything I find very interesting, and we'll also be talking about his latest book as well. The Gothic Nightmares one. Just about kind of the cult spin on a lot of movies and stuff.
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah. Now, what about other authors like Michael Ford or
Michael Ford? I would recommend him also. Great guy too. I got to meet him. We were at a conference together up in Portland. We got to be friends. Outstanding human being.
What about Dr. Aquino's writings?
Oh yeah. Also, I'd recommend him. I would recommend, like I was saying, Julius Evola. Give him a try. Don't listen to the propaganda saying he's a fascist and all that shit. Because
there's a lot of that going on right now because that publisher decided to re-release his book or whatever.
He was not a fascist. Okay, he was a traditionalist with a capital T, and those who practice traditionalism look at fascism like they look at socialism, like they look at communism, as they look at capitalism, whatever. All these isms are part of modernity. They want nothing to do with it. Now, he originally thought that those original fascists, the real fascist kids, not somebody you don't like who just simply call a fascist, but the real fascists, as in Mussolini and Giovanni Gentile and so on and so forth, from Italy, of course. He thought originally, they were going to link our Italian culture back to Rome, if you will. And a way of doing that, the best way of doing that is spiritually. If you want to even spread a culture, it's not through conquering, but the best way is to do it through religion or spiritual practices. And he thought maybe they would have that link, that he could attach himself to them, and they would, he could go down this path toward, this rejuvenation, if you will, of Roman traditional values, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. The Italians were doing that, and the Germans were doing the same thing, trying to rewrite their ancient history and try to tie it all together. And
then he realized,
it was like, trying to create this lineage all the way back to Percival or something like that,
Right. And he discovered, no, they weren't doing that. They were political.
Yeah.
So he disconnected from them. And then he found some interest in the SS, of all people. This is during the 1930s, before all the real ugliness began. The real ugliness. There was already some ugliness, as we well know. But anyway, he tried to attach himself to the SS, but then they didn't like him because he had problems with their biological racism. He believed in the aristocracy of the soul. That the soul is where you find nobility. It's not in the skin color or the nationality of the person. Where, as we well know, as everyone knows about the Nazis, if you're Germanic, especially you white Germanic, you're at the top of the heap, Teutonic, whatever you want to call it. You're at the top of the heap, and then maybe the Celts, and then maybe way down are the Slavs, and then way down at the bottom of the Jews, and so on and so forth. Where he thought, nah, there's nobility of the soul. He would have more respect, and I mentioned this on a recent video. He would have more respect for a samurai and their warrior culture and their connection to tradition than he would for, let's say, a white racist hillbilly, even though he and the white racist hillbilly were both white.
Right.
So, of course, his time mingling with the SS didn't last very long.
Well, also to look at it through the lenses of 2024 or whatever, none of that stuff ages nicely. It all ages really foul. And I think if you really look at the dynamics, again, I'm a history buff as well, and you just look at, from the fall of the Weimar Republic, you had all these screaming socialists and communists and fascists all fighting in the streets, with this crashed economy. And you think like, that's how ideas like that take root and grow, and anybody that doesn't believe that, I mean, just look at how freaked out people got during COVID here, and that's not even a inkling of the type of pressure those people were living under, and fighting,
Yeah, Germany was made responsible for all the debts of World War I. And it devastated them. And they're a very proud culture. Remember, this is the country, this is the nation of philosophers and composers, thinkers, very, very cultured. And they were absolutely devastated by this massive debt. I mean, how many marks? It would be like a million marks to buy a loaf of bread or whatever. It was insane.
They had wheelbarrows of money.
Yeah.
The kids were just playing with it because it wasn't worth anything.
So society was just turning to absolute shit. So they were looking for anything to attach themselves to. And this guy with a funny little Charlie Chaplin mustache comes around and says, "You know what? You're the greatest human beings that have ever existed."
Right. And I have a plan to bring us back and make us number one again.
So they're like, fuck yeah. We'll listen to this guy, but little, And also, we got to understand, too, that previous to World War II, racism was super common. It was very common. The vast majority of people were racist. I know a lot of people like to think back and say, oh, I would never have been racist. I don't know about that. A lot of people were racist. It was more or less a given in a sense. And it wasn't until after World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust and so on and so forth that people kind of went, this racist thing, not a great idea.
Yeah.
This racism, the stratification of human beings, so on and so forth. When in truth, we're all Homo sapiens. We're all the same animals, and our differences are cultural.
Yeah, I find all of that history stuff very interesting too, and there's other factors that brought all that around, including American banks and philanthropists who funded a lot of that, and to get that war machine moving, but that's another topic on another show. Another time. You could just go down that rabbit hole and stuff, but we were talking about authors, and that's how we kind of slipped into there. But what about other authors? Who else would you recommend? I
would recommend all different kinds of philosophers too. I mean, I'm a fan of Albert Camus and absurdism, uh, let me see. Another obscure French philosopher writer. He didn't really call himself a philosopher, but Georges Bataille. Uh, what? Okay, he's fascinating. He was. He's known for writing this. How I originally became aware of him was from this book called The Story of the Eye. It's eroticism, and it's kind of gory eroticism written in the 1920s. It wasn't until after his death that people went, "Hey, Bataille actually wrote that," because he wrote it under a pen name. But also, he had an organization and a journal called Asafel, as in headless. It comes from Greek. And back in the 1930s France, he could see that the Wotan archetype, let's call it, was rearing its ugly head, was coming back, who was basically returning. Wotan, Woden, Odin, that archetype was stirring again. And even Jung wrote about it ahead of time. He could see it. He could see it stirring in the hearts of the Germanic peoples. He even wrote a long piece about it in the 1930s. Anyway, Bataille, to counter this, he wanted to raise up, if you will, the Dionysian archetype. So he started the organization Asafel, a secret society that would meet under this tree that was struck by lightning, where they would have these erotic rites and so on and so forth. And they even wanted, somebody volunteered to be a human sacrifice, but none of the other members were willing to kill the person. So they wanted, like I said, they wanted to bring up the Dionysian archetype to counterbalance the Wotan archetype that they saw sweeping through Europe.
Right.
They were very Nietzschean also. They were very much into the Marquis de Sade. But of course it was, a bit too little too late. He's absolutely fascinating. I recommend his writings. I'm a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan. And his philosophy, basically, and few people realize this, his stories are based on the philosophy of cosmicism. And what cosmicism is, basically the idea that you don't matter in the whole scheme of the cosmos, of the universe. He was a huge fan of astronomy. And the more he studied astronomy, the smaller he felt, if you will. So in his stories, he created the old ones, the gods, the Cthulhu and so on and so forth. And they represent that vast, indifferent universe, because his gods are indifferent in his stories. They're not evil creatures looking to,
and we're so insignificant,
right,
in comparison to them. And just the thought that we even know they exist would shatter your mind.
Exactly. They were like, I would compare them like we were just ants on an anthill, and they're a lawnmower going over the anthill. You know what I mean? They're not purposely trying to take out that who's ever pushing that lawnmower. He isn't aiming for the ants. Yeah. He's just doing his thing. So yeah, that's the idea of cosmicism. And few people realize that his stories, with all their weirdness, actually are kind of uplifting in some ways. At least that's what I get out of them. There's a positive attribute to them, of trying to find truth within, and meaning, your own personal meaning within this vast and different universe. So yeah, Lovecraft's a big one. I know there's and I recommend anything by Joseph Campbell, mythology.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big one. He's a big influence on our organization. He helps you to understand what mythology is, and the themes throughout mythology, the monomyth, if you will, the hero's journey, so on and so forth. Yeah, he's huge. And I think I'd mentioned Crowley. everybody should read Crowley if if you're into the occult. Blavatsky, you can kind of like, I don't know about theosophy. I see a lot of, I see some nonsense in there, if you will. She was educated. She knew her shit, but she also made up a lot of horse shit too on top of it. So I don't know about her. But
and what about yourself? I know on the website there you have some essays that you've written. What about any books? Have you written any books?
I've ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be an author, write sci-fi, horror, fantasy, that sort of stuff. And I've done a lot of writing, and a lot of what I had written was in hard copies over the years. But back in 2016, that winery that I was on, it was burnt down in one of the wildfires. It went through and just destroyed everything. I lost absolutely everything, including everything that I had.
Was it like one of those deals where you had like only minutes to like get the fuck out of there and like,
okay, I remember it vividly. It was a Sunday. It was August 16th, 2016. It was a Sunday, and the fire had started the day before. And around noon on that Sunday, we were standing out on Main Street of the small town we live in. And I was looking off toward the east, and you could see huge plumes of smoke. And I was thinking, okay, it's moving away. It's sort of heading in a northeasterly direction. And I thought, okay, I guess we'll be cool. And then somebody pointed to the south and said, what the hell is that? And there was this huge mushroom cloud, it looked like, to the south of us that wasn't connected to the main fire. And what it turned out to be was an arsonist. He was going around starting these fires. And right after we saw that, deputy came by and said, you have 10 minutes to get the hell out. And right around that time, too, a friend of mine who lives a couple of towns away called me and said, get up here. So we all hopped in the car, grabbed what we could real quick, hopped in the car. And I thought for sure they were going to put it out before it got to our winery. Because our winery is just right off Main Street. There's a post office right next to us. And across the street from us is a funeral home. So I'm thinking, okay, you know what? They're gonna put out this fire before it gets anywhere near all these important structures. So I was mainly worried about looters, if you will. So we grabbed our bare necessities, hopped in the car, took off. And then later on that night, I was watching the news, the Bay Area news, and I watched my home burn down on the news. Yeah, my poor daughter hadn't heard from me, and she posted on Facebook. She goes, oh my God, I'm watching my dad's house burn down and I don't know where he is. I had to give her a call.
Wow.
But yeah, we ended up losing everything. Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, how does one overcome something like that? How do you get back in the groove after losing everything?
It's a rough one. What's funny, you had brought up the Simon Necronomicon. I had, over the years, I owned 2 copies. My first copy I bought back in 1979. I cut it off the back of do you remember Heavy Metal magazine? It was, with the artwork, a lot of it like French artwork and, cartoons, comics, whatever.
Yeah.
And there was an issue dedicated to Lovecraft. And on the back of that issue was saying, get your copy of the Necronomicon for $30. Just fill out this coupon, send us a check. So I did that. And so I had this signed copy of the Simon Necronomicon. It was signed in red ink by the mysterious Simon, whoever that was. That copy I had left with my ex-wife back, like, I don't know, when we split up. And I planned on getting it back, once I got settled. I was heading down to LA. This was during my acting phase. And her place burned down. So I lost that copy. All right. And a bunch of other occult books I had for ages, ever since I was a kid. All right. Then I got another copy, and that copy was still in the house in the winery. So I've had 2 copies of the Simon Necronomicon that have gone up in flames. These are hardcover copies.
Wow.
You know what I mean? These beautiful books.
Oh.
If you've seen those hardcover copies, they're tremendous.
I have at the I originally from New York, and I used to go into the Magical Child bookstore all the time. And that's actually the individual who put out the Necronomicon. And it's actually a pretty funny story. Early in the beginning of my podcast, I think it was maybe the third or fourth episode, I interviewed Peter Lavenda, and I talked to him about because purportedly he is Simon and wrote the intro for the Necronomicon, and all that was put together at the Magical Child. And he has a pretty interesting story, although he does not admit to being Simon. For anybody that goes and listens to that episode, he's pretty informative about where that book came from and who published it.
Yeah, it was beautiful, beautiful copy. That first one, that like I said, signed and all that, only $30. I don't know how much they are now, but
I'm sure the leather bound cool one like that and stuff like they used to have a big huge one in Magical Child window when I was younger, and it was like leather bound and like gold leaf and everything. And
this had the silver leaf on
it.
Copy
I think it was like $500 then. You know,
Shit.
In fact, the band Morbid Angel on their Covenant album cover has a copy of that Necronomicon book that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Damn, I wish I would have grabbed that book. Well, then it'd be gone anyway, because I would have lost it in the last fire. But
wow.
Yeah. So I've had 2 copies, both gone up in flames. I don't know what that means. Should I try for a third?
That's funny. Now, had your organization allows membership and for people to fill out a questionnaire. First off, how big is the organization, and what is the criteria for accepting members into the Sect of the Horn God?
Basically, I would have to ask my wife how many members we actually have, but it's well over 1,000.
Okay, wow, wow, that's a lot. Yeah.
It might even be a couple of thousand, because we've been around since 2011. Now, a lot of the members, we have like Facebook groups, so on and so forth. A lot of the members aren't in those groups; they're more private. But it's fairly large. And okay, we have that questionnaire, and that questionnaire, the one that's on our website, is basically just to make sure you aren't batshit crazy. And then after you fill out that questionnaire, we have a follow-up where we get to know you a little better, where your head's at, what level you're at, you know, on this path. Are you a beginner? Have you been on it for a while? So on and so forth. Because then we have what's called the orders. It begins with the order of Pan, which is, let's say, basic Satanism. Then we have the order of Kernanos, which is the history of the occult. And then the order of Prometheus, which is critical thinking, because we want people to be able to think. Now,
do you have to send these in particular order, or
no? See, that's the thing. And then also we have a couple other orders like Dionysus. We have the order of Iblis, you know, and then finally the final order is the order of Shiva. Now, if you're a newbie, we'll have you go through. You'll follow that path, those orders in that order. But if you've been around for a while, we're not going to give you like basic Satanism or the basics of the occult, because you already know all that. So we'll jump you ahead to one of the, the higher up orders. We'll structure a packet, if you will, for you specifically. And then as you work your way up, we have a degree system. We have, the neophytes, the acolyte, and then finally you work your way up to a Cenobite. inspired by
Clive Barker,
Clive
Hellraiser.
Barker. Yeah, in some ways, yeah. And Cenobite is a legit term for individuals that come together in a let's say a religious order, if you will.
Are these all self-initiatory levels, or do these do they actually, or do the participants actually come to you? Is there a place that where they're initiated, or
Basically, it's online right now, and if they want to, I mean, they're always welcome.
Sure.
Meet up like when we had the winery, we would have events. We even had some sect members living there on the winery. We had rituals, all that. It's a little different now. We're
kind of like the parsonage?
yeah, or the Abbey of Thelema, or we called it the Abbey of the Horn God. The winery was the Abbey of the Horn God,
That's
and
great.
it was set up. It was really cool the way the winery is set up. It looked like a little Tuscan village, if you will.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was suitable for like Renaissance fairs and stuff like that, and then the pagan festival. Yeah, it was a beautiful location. I mean, when you were there, you were no longer in Northern California. You were somewhere else.
Yeah.
And like I said, we had some members living there. We had multiple festivals and rituals and so on and so forth. You could actually come there, met plenty of members, so on and so forth. But it's a little different now. Now we're staying in a small house. We plan on going back to the winery. The owner plans on rebuilding.
Really? So that's still a possibility to return to the winery and
we really want
to hosting events there and everything.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Yeah, my wife and I were really looking forward to going back. So we'll see what happens.
Right. Absolutely. That would be all. It sounds like that would be awesome, for sure. And
what's interesting is the fire. It took out all the structures, but it didn't take out the grapevines.
Really?
Yeah. It took out a lot of trees, though. We had a lot of fruit trees on the property. It took out those, but it didn't take out the grapevines. None of the grapevines were touched.
Wow.
So they're still there.
Yeah,
and the winery, and like I said, the winery owner, he wants to rebuild. So we'll see what happens.
California is such an interesting place. Just the amount of magical references that you can talk about, or even just the magic of Hollywood, even, and the history there and stuff. Yeah. Such a beautiful place with so many deadly, I guess, disasters that can pop up, from earthquakes to mudslides to floods to wildfires.
In this county, it's the county I live in, more acreage has been burned than not burned. It's close. I think it's creeping up on 60% of this county has burned. And this is just within the last 10 years or so. Sacramento hasn't been great at let's say, watching over the environment, if you will. They like to squawk about climate change and this and that, but controlling, the forest management, all that, they haven't bothered. They'd rather there be catastrophes, so then they can say, look, we told you there was climate change.
Right. Meanwhile, it's just like not cleaning up a lot of the stuff that could cause the fires and stuff.
The dead, vegetation, so on and so forth. There's a lot of stuff they could do. There's a lot they can do, but they're not bothering because they want the problem. So that way they can show, see, this is the reason why we have to convert over to, I don't know, electric cars or whatever, because of the climate change and blah, blah. It's like, come on, if there's a problem and we pay, our taxes are insane in this state.
In San Francisco, I think that's one of the most expensive places in the United States to live.
Oh yeah.
I know a guy who was a doctor that he couldn't find a house to live in San Francisco.
A doctor. A doctor.
He was getting a job out there and he couldn't find a place to live.
The common person can't live there any longer.
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
interesting times. And New York is the same way too.
Yeah.
It's like I'm originally from there, and same thing. It's just very high priced. I don't know how people do it. They say uh, in order to make ends meet or whatever and live in New York, you need to make at least 125,000 a year.
Jeez. Yeah. Yeah, that's San Francisco too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure. And
It,
what upcoming projects or events do you have in the works, or do you have any plans for anything?
well, I'm piecing together my book. And the problem with writing a book, this is a book of philosophy, if you will,
Mhm.
of sinisterous philosophy. I've also written a lot of fiction, but this is a book of sinisterous philosophy. And what the problem is, as they say, it's like you're never finished writing a book. You just have to stop. You know what I mean? Because I'm constantly adding, I'm constantly editing. And I've been doing this for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years now. And I always think this is the year I'm going to get the book out. But then I keep going at it and going at it. And it's like, I have to just stop and then just, see about self-publishing, or I know some people who publish. Yeah. So I'm hoping this year my book comes out. But then again, I said that last year.
And do we have a tentative title for it?
Yeah, but I'm not going to say right
Okay.
now.
Okay. And for any information on the Sect of the Horn God, we should just recommend everybody go to sectofthehorngod.com.
Yeah, the website, and also we're on Facebook. We have groups on Facebook. We have a like page. We have the Sect of the Horn God group that's open to anyone. We also have a private members only group. I'm on Instagram. I don't know what I'm there. I don't know why I'm on Instagram. I don't know what I'm doing. It's a place to look at pictures of hot girls, I guess.
Yeah.
And of course, my YouTube channel, Thomas LeRoy, YouTube. Yeah, just put in Thomas LeRoy, you'll find me.
Great. Thomas, thank you for coming on Magister Dixit and talking to us about the Sect. And we'll definitely have to have you back after your book is out.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much.